Mara's hands froze over $2,000 left on a diner table. The mysterious customer had vanished into the rainy night. She needed this money desperately. Rent was overdue. Her family was struggling, and bills were piling up. But her father's voice echoed in her mind. Integrity is all you have. What she did next stunned everyone. She tracked down the billionaire to return his money, never expecting it was all a test that would change her life forever. Hey family, welcome to Real Life Heart Stories. Please subscribe and give this video a like. It truly means the world to us. Don't forget to share it with your friends and loved ones, and turn on post notifications so you never miss a new upload. Thank you so much for the support. Now, sit back, relax, and let's dive into today's story. Mara's hands trembled as she stared at the 20 crisp $100 bills folded neatly beneath the empty coffee cup. Her heart hammered against her ribs. $2,000. More money than she'd seen in months, maybe years. The diner was nearly empty now, just the hum of the old refrigerator and the distant clatter of dishes being washed in the kitchen. She glanced around quickly. Nobody was watching. The man who'd sat at table 7 was gone, disappeared into the rainy night 15 minutes ago. She reached for the money, then pulled her hand back as if it had burned her. Her throat tightened. This wasn't right. Couldn't be. People didn't just leave $2,000 behind by accident. But then again, she'd cleared enough tables to know that people forgot things all the time. Phones, wallets, jackets. Why not cash? You gonna stand there all night or clean that table? Her coworker Jenny called from behind the counter, filling salt shakers for the morning shift. Mara quickly grabbed the bills and shoved them into her apron pocket, her face flushing hot. She grabbed the dirty dishes with shaking hands and hurried toward the kitchen, her mind racing. What was she supposed to do? Turn it in? To who? The man hadn't left a name, hadn't used a credit card, just paid his bill with $100 and left the rest sitting there like it meant nothing. Her manager, Rick, was counting the register when she pushed through the kitchen doors. He looked up with tired eyes. Table 7 clear? Yeah, Mara whispered, unable to meet his gaze. The money felt like it was burning a hole through her apron, through her skin, branding her as a thief even though she hadn't decided to keep it yet. Hadn't decided anything. You okay? You look sick. Just tired, she lied, setting the dishes in the sink with a clatter that made her wince. Long shift. Rick nodded knowingly. Tell me about it. Get out of here. I'll finish closing up. Mara nodded and fumbled with her apron strings, her fingers clumsy and numb. She hung it on the hook by the door and grabbed her worn jacket from the employee break room. The money was still in the apron pocket. She stared at it for a long moment, her conscience and her desperation waging war inside her chest. She thought about her landlord's final notice tucked under her apartment door, the electricity bill that was 2 months overdue, her mother's medication that cost more than Mara made in a week, her little brother's school supplies she couldn't afford. $2,000 could fix everything. For a little while at least, her hand hovered over the apron pocket. All she had to do was take it and walk away. Nobody would know. Nobody would care. The man who left it was probably rich enough that he wouldn't even notice it was gone. But she would know. She would carry it with her every single day for the rest of her life. Mara closed her eyes and made a decision that would change everything. 24 hours earlier, Daniel Cross sat in the back of his private car, staring at his phone screen with a clenched jaw. The numbers didn't lie. 3 years of work, millions of dollars invested, and his competitor had beaten him to the patent by exactly 48 hours. Sir, we're approaching the city, his driver said quietly from the front seat. Daniel didn't respond. He couldn't. The words were stuck somewhere between his throat and his chest, tangled up with rage and disappointment and something else he couldn't quite name. Failure, maybe, or emptiness. He'd built an empire on being first, on being smarter, faster, more ruthless than everyone else. And for what? So he could sit in the back of a luxury car, surrounded by leather and technology and success, feeling absolutely nothing? Pull over, he said suddenly. The driver glanced at him in the rearview mirror. Sir, I said pull over. Anywhere. I don't care. The car slowed and eased onto the shoulder of the highway. Rain pattered against the windows, streaking the glass with gray light from the street lamps overhead. Daniel could see a small diner about a quarter-mile ahead, its neon sign flickering in the darkness. "I'm getting out here," he said, already reaching for the door handle. "Mr. Cross, it's nearly midnight. Should I wait for you?" "No. Go home. I'll call when I need you." The driver looked uncertain but nodded. Daniel stepped out into the rain, not bothering to shield himself from it. The cold water soaked through his $1,000 suit jacket in seconds, but he barely noticed. He just started walking toward the diner, his shoes splashing through puddles, his mind still churning over everything he'd lost today. The diner's door chimed when he pushed it open. Warm air and the smell of coffee and grease hit him immediately. A handful of customers sat scattered at tables and booths, and a waitress looked up from behind the counter with a tired but genuine smile. "Sit anywhere you'd like, Han," she called. Daniel chose a booth in the corner, away from the windows and the other customers. He just wanted to be alone, to think, to figure out how to fix the unfixable. The waitress appeared at his table within minutes, pulling a pen from behind her ear. She was young, maybe late 20s, with dark circles under her eyes and brown hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. Her name tag read Mara. "Coffee?" she asked. "Please." She poured from the pot she was carrying, the stream steady and practiced. "You look like you've had a rough night." Daniel glanced up at her, surprised by the comment. Most people didn't dare speak to him so casually. Then again, she had no idea who he was. There was something refreshing about that. "You could say that," he replied. "Well, coffee helps. So does pie. We've got apple and cherry left." Despite everything, Daniel felt the corner of his mouth twitch. "Just coffee is fine." Mara nodded and started to turn away, but something made her pause. For what it's worth, whatever happened tonight probably isn't as bad as it feels right now. Things have a way of working out. He wanted to tell her she was wrong, that some things couldn't work out, that some losses were permanent. But instead, he just said, "Thanks." She gave him another small smile and walked away, leaving him alone with his thoughts and his coffee. Daniel wrapped his hands around the warm cup and stared out the rain-streaked window, watching cars pass by on the highway. Everyone rushing somewhere. Everyone chasing something. What was he chasing anymore? He had more money than he could spend in 10 lifetimes, properties on 3 continents, a company that employed thousands of people. But sitting here in this rundown diner, soaking wet and defeated, he felt poorer than he'd ever felt in his entire life. Mara refilled coffee cups and cleared tables on autopilot, her body moving through the familiar motions while her mind drifted elsewhere. Rent was due in 3 days. She'd already asked for an extension twice this month, and her landlord had made it clear there wouldn't be a third time. Then there was the electricity bill, the water bill, her mother's prescriptions, and her brother Marcus's school fees. She'd done the math 100 times, lying awake at night and staring at the ceiling. Even with the extra shifts she'd picked up, she was still $400 short. $400 might as well have been $4 million. If you're enjoying the story so far, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss our next video. We've got more incredible true stories coming your way. "You okay, sweetie?" Jenny asked, passing her with a tray of dirty dishes. "Yeah, just thinking. Thinking don't pay the bills," Jenny said with a knowing look. She was 50-something, had worked at the diner for 15 years, and had the wisdom that came from a hard life. But worrying don't help either. One day at a time, right? Right? Mara agreed, though the words felt hollow. She glanced over at the man in the corner booth. He'd been sitting there for over an hour now, nursing the same cup of coffee and staring out the window like he was watching a movie only he could see. He looked expensive, even soaking wet. Everything about him screamed money, from his perfectly tailored suit to the watch on his wrist that probably cost more than her car. What would it be like, she wondered, to have so much that losing a business deal felt like the end of the world? What kind of problems did rich people have that made them look so miserable? Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out and saw a text from her mother. "Marcus needs new shoes for gym class. His fell apart today. Can you help? Mara's chest tightened. She typed back, I'll figure something out. Don't worry. But she was worrying. Marcus was only 12, growing out of everything faster than she could replace it. And their mother, with her bad knees and medical bills, couldn't work anymore. Everything fell on Mara's shoulders, and those shoulders were getting tired. She slipped the phone back into her pocket and picked up the coffee pot, making another round. When she reached the corner booth, the man looked up at her with dark, exhausted eyes. Refill? She asked. Please. As she poured, she noticed his hands were shaking slightly. Rough night is getting rougher? She asked gently. He let out a short, bitter laugh. You have no idea. Try me. I've seen a lot of rough nights in this place. He studied her for a moment, as if trying to decide whether she was genuine or just being polite. Finally, he said, I lost something today, something I spent years working toward. I'm sorry, Mara said, and meant it. That's never easy. The worst part is I have everything else, he continued, the words tumbling out like he'd been holding them in too long. Everything people are supposed to want, but it all feels meaningless. Mara set the coffee pot down and slid into the booth across from him, knowing Rick would be annoyed but not caring. This man needed someone to listen, and she knew what it felt like to need that. Money doesn't fix empty, she said quietly. I don't have much, but I've learned that much. He looked at her with something like surprise, then nodded slowly. No, it doesn't. They sat in silence for a moment, two strangers from completely different worlds, connected by the simple human experience of struggling with something. What's your name? He asked. Mara. Daniel, he replied, and they shook hands across the table. An hour later, the diner was down to its last few customers. Mara brought Daniel his bill, and he pulled out his wallet without looking at it. Keep the change, he said, handing her $100 bill for a $12 tab. Sir, that's too much. You listened when you didn't have to. That's worth something. He stood up, grabbed his jacket, and headed for the door. Mara watched him go, then looked down at the bill in her hand. $88. It would help, but it wouldn't be enough. She went to clear his table and froze. Sitting there, folded neatly beneath his empty coffee cup, was a stack of money that made her heart stop. She picked it up with trembling hands and counted. 20 $100 bills. $2,000. Her first thought was that it was a mistake. Her second thought was that it was a miracle. Her third thought was that she needed to return it. But the man was already gone, disappeared into the rainy night. Oh my God, Jenny whispered, appearing at her shoulder. Is that real? I think so, Mara breathed. Girl, that's a sign. That's the universe answering your prayers. It's a mistake. Mistake or not, he's gone. You've got no way to return it. Jenny squeezed her shoulder. Maybe it's your turn for something good to happen. Rick appeared from the kitchen. What's going on? Nothing, Mara said quickly, shoving the money into her apron pocket. Just finishing up. But Rick had seen, his eyes narrowing. That better be your tips you're pocketing. It is, Mara lied, her face burning. He stared at her for a long moment, then shrugged. Lock up when you're done. He disappeared back into his office. Mara's hands wouldn't stop shaking. She finished her closing duties in a daze, her mind spinning. $2,000. It was enough to pay rent, the utilities, Marcus's shoes, Mom's medication, and still have some left over. It was enough to breathe for the first time in months. But it wasn't hers. You're really thinking about giving it back? Jenny asked, watching her with disbelief. Mara, honey, when was the last time something good happened to you? When was the last time you caught a break? It's not mine, Mara repeated, but her voice was weak. He left it. That makes it yours. Mara thought about her landlord's final notice, about Marcus growing out of his shoes, about her mother rationing her medication to make it last longer, about the electricity that might get shut off next week. She thought about her father, dead 5 years now, who used to say that integrity was the only thing nobody could take from you. I need to think, she whispered. Jenny sighed but nodded. Whatever you decide. I've got your back. Mara walked home that night in the rain, the money heavy in her pocket, heavier than it should have been. Every step felt like a decision, every breath like a choice between survival and honor. When she reached her tiny apartment, she sat on her bed and counted the money again, just to make sure it was real. It was $2,000. Fortune. A lifeline. A test. She didn't sleep that night. She just sat there, staring at the bills spread across her worn bedspread, trying to figure out what kind of person she wanted to be. Morning came gray and cold. Mara had made her decision sometime around 3 a.m., when exhaustion finally gave way to clarity. She couldn't keep the money, not because of some abstract moral principle, but because she knew herself. She knew she'd carry the guilt of it forever, that it would poison every dollar she spent, that she'd see the man's face every time she looked at her paid rent or her brother's new shoes. Integrity wasn't just something her father had preached. It was who she was, even when it hurt. The problem was she had no idea how to find Daniel. He'd paid cash, left no receipt with a name or phone number. She didn't even know his last name. Just Daniel, in an expensive suit, who'd disappeared into the night. She called the diner. Rick. Did that guy from last night leave any contact information? What guy? Table 7. Expensive suit. About 40. Dark hair. Mara, we get a lot of people through here. Why? He left something behind. I need to return it. Rick was quiet for a moment. Left something valuable? Her stomach dropped. She couldn't tell Rick about the money. He'd insist on keeping it, claim it as lost property for the diner, or worse, pocket it himself. Just something personal, she lied. I'd feel bad if he didn't get it back. Well, if he wants it, he'll come back for it. Leave it alone, Mara. She hung up, frustrated. She spent the morning calling hotels in the area, asking if they had a guest named Daniel, but none of them would give her any information. Privacy policies, they said. She understood, but it didn't make her search any easier. By afternoon, she was ready to give up. Maybe Jenny was right. Maybe this was meant to be. Maybe the universe was trying to help her, and she was too stubborn to accept it. Then she remembered something. She pulled out the money and examined it carefully. Tucked between two of the bills was a small slip of paper, a valet parking ticket from the Grandeur Hotel, time-stamped from yesterday evening. The Grandeur, the most expensive hotel in the city, where rooms started at $500 a night, where billionaires and celebrities stayed when they came to town. Mara's heart raced. It wasn't much, but it was something. She showered, put on her cleanest jeans and nicest sweater, and caught the bus downtown. If you're loving this story, don't forget to drop a comment below and let us know what you would do in Mara's situation. Would you keep the money or return it? We'd love to hear from you. The Grangeur's lobby was all marble and gold, crystal chandeliers hanging from vaulted ceilings, well-dressed people moving through with the confidence of those who belonged. Mara felt immediately out of place, her worn clothes and scuffed shoes marking her as an outsider. She approached the front desk, where a woman in a perfectly pressed suit looked up with a practiced smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Can I help you? I'm looking for a guest. His name is Daniel. He stayed here last night. The woman's smile tightened. I'm sorry, we can't give out guest information. I know, but it's important. He left something at the diner where I work, and I need to return it to him. You can leave it with us, and if he contacts us, we'll let him know. Mara hesitated. She didn't trust that the money would reach him. Is there any way you could just tell him I'm here? Call his room. Ma'am, I can't confirm or deny whether anyone named Daniel is staying here. The woman's tone had shifted from polite to dismissive. If you'd like to leave the item, you can. Otherwise, I'll have to ask you to step aside. Mara felt her face flush with embarrassment. Behind her, someone cleared their throat impatiently. She stepped away from the desk, clutching her purse where the money was hidden, feeling lost and foolish. Security was watching her now, a man in a dark suit with an earpiece, his gaze making it clear she wasn't welcome. She turned and walked toward the exit, her eyes stinging with frustrated tears. She tried. That had to count for something, right? She'd made the effort. If the universe didn't want her to return the money, maybe that meant she was supposed to keep it after all. But as she pushed through the revolving doors back onto the street, she knew she couldn't give up yet. Not really. She'd carry this guilt forever if she didn't try everything. She stood on the sidewalk, watching expensive cars pull up to the valet stand. A thought occurred to her. The valet. The parking ticket had come from here. Maybe one of them had seen Daniel, knew which car was his, could point her in the right direction. She approached a young valet who was waiting for the next car to arrive. "Excuse me." He looked at her warily. "Can I help you? I'm trying to find someone. A man who was here last night. Dark hair, expensive suit, probably drove something nice." The valet laughed. "Lady, you just described half our guests." "Please," Mara said, hearing the desperation in her own voice. "His name is Daniel. It's really important." The valet's expression softened slightly. "Look, I'd like to help, but I can't give out guest information. I could lose my job. I understand. I just—" She trailed off, not sure what else to say. "What's this about?" he asked, lowering his voice. Mara glanced around, then pulled out the stack of bills. "He left this at the diner. I need to give it back to him." The valet's eyes widened. "That's $2,000. "I know. And you're trying to return it?" "Yes." He stared at her for a long moment, then shook his head in amazement. "You're either really honest or really crazy." He pulled out his phone. "There was a guy last night. Black sedan, dismissed his driver. Came back a few hours later in a cab, soaking wet. Name was Cross. Daniel Cross." Mara's breath caught. "Daniel Cross? The tech guy. You know him?" She didn't, not personally, but everyone knew the name. Daniel Cross was one of the richest men in the country. A tech billionaire whose face appeared in business magazines and news articles. The idea that he'd been sitting in their rundown diner, talking to her like a regular person, seemed impossible. "Is he still here?" she asked. "I think so. But look, I can't just let you up to his room. Can you call him? Tell him I'm here." The valet hesitated, then nodded. "I'll try. But if security comes, I'm telling them I don't know you." "Fair enough." He made the call, spoke in low tones, then hung up and looked at her with surprise. "He's coming down." Mara waited in the lobby, heart pounding, clutching her purse. Part of her wanted to run, to escape before Daniel arrived and before she had to explain herself. But she'd come this far. She could finish it. 5 minutes later, the elevator doors opened, and Daniel stepped out. He was wearing jeans and a casual sweater, looking more relaxed than he had last night, but his expression was guarded as he scanned the lobby. His eyes found her, and recognition flickered across his face. He walked over slowly. "Mara." "Hi," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "What are you doing here?" She reached into her purse and pulled out the money, holding it out to him. "You left this at the diner. I wanted to return it." Daniel stared at the bills, then at her, his expression unreadable. "You tracked me down to return $2,000? It's not mine. You left it by accident." "And if I told you it wasn't an accident?" Mara blinked, confused. "What?" Daniel gestured to a seating area away from the front desk. "Can we talk for a minute?" They sat in leather chairs, Mara perched on the edge of hers, the money still clutched in her hands. Daniel leaned back, studying her with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. "I left the money on purpose," he said finally. "Why would you do that?" "Because I wanted to see what you'd do with it." Mara felt anger flash through her, hot and sudden. This was a test? Not exactly. More like an experiment. He ran a hand through his hair, looking almost embarrassed. "Last night, after I left the diner, I sat in my hotel room thinking about our conversation. About what you said, that money doesn't fix empty. Stuck with me. So you decided to test my integrity?" "I decided to see if honest people still existed," he corrected. "You'd be surprised how rare it is." "I'm not some experiment," Mara said, standing up. She thrust the money at him. "Here, take it. I don't want anything from you." Mara, wait. But she was already walking toward the door, her face hot with humiliation and anger. She'd spent all night wrestling with her conscience, all morning tracking him down. And for what? So some rich man could prove a point about human nature? Mara, please. Daniel caught up to her at the doors. I'm sorry. That came out wrong. You think. She spun to face him. Do you have any idea what last night was like for me? I have bills I can't pay, a family I can barely support, and you left enough money to solve all of my problems sitting on a table like it was nothing. And I couldn't sleep, couldn't think, because all I could see was my father's face reminding me that some things matter more than money. Her voice cracked, and she hated herself for it. I came here because it was the right thing to do, not because I wanted to pass some rich man's test. So take your money and your experiments and leave me alone. She pushed through the doors and out onto the street, not caring that people were staring, not caring about anything except getting away. The tears came then, hot and angry, and she wiped them away furiously as she walked. Behind her, she heard Daniel call her name, but she didn't stop. She just kept walking, leaving the grandeur and its marble floors and its billionaire guests behind, heading back to her small apartment and her unpaid bills and her life of barely making it. But at least she could look at herself in the mirror. At least she'd done the right thing, even if it cost her everything. At least her father would be proud. Mara called in sick to work that night. She couldn't face the diner, couldn't face Jenny's questions, couldn't face the table where Daniel had sat and left his test for her to fail or pass. She sat in her apartment, staring at the final notice from her landlord, and wondered how she was going to make rent. Her phone buzzed. An unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Hello? Mara, it's Daniel. Please don't hang up. She should have. She should have blocked his number and forgotten this whole mess. But something in his voice stopped her. I'm listening. I need to apologize. Properly. Not in a hotel lobby where you're rightfully angry. Will you meet me for coffee? Somewhere neutral. Your choice. Why would I do that? Because I owe you an explanation. And because. He paused. Because you reminded me that there are still good people in the world, and I'd like to do something about that. Mara closed her eyes. She should say no. She should protect herself and her pride and move on. But curiosity got the better of her. There's a coffee shop on 5th Street. Tomorrow at 10. I'll be there. She hung up and sat in the silence of her apartment, wondering what she'd just agreed to and why her hands were shaking again. The next morning, Mara arrived at the coffee shop early, ordering a tea she couldn't really afford and claiming a table by the window. Daniel arrived exactly at 10, looking out of place in his expensive clothes in the small neighborhood cafe. He sat down across from her, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. I'm sorry, he said finally. Truly. What I did was arrogant and thoughtless. Yes, it was. You're right that I was testing you, but not in the way you think. He leaned forward. I've spent the last 20 years building a company, making money, surrounding myself with people who only care about what I can give them. And somewhere along the way, I forgot what real integrity looks like, what it costs. I still don't understand why you chose me. Because when you sat with me in that diner, you didn't see a billionaire or a business mogul. You saw a person who was struggling, and you offered kindness without expecting anything in return. He smiled sadly. That's rarer than you know. Mara wrapped her hands around her teacup. What do you want from me, Daniel? Nothing. I want to give you something, not as payment or as a reward for passing some test, but because I can and because you deserve it. I don't want your charity. It's not charity. It's an investment. He pulled out an envelope and slid it across the table. Inside is a check and some information about a scholarship program my foundation runs. Full tuition anywhere you want to go. Any degree you want to pursue. Mara stared at the envelope but didn't touch it. I'm a waitress. You're a waitress because circumstances put you there, not because it's all you can be. I looked into you, Mara. You graduated top of your high school class with a scholarship to college. But you couldn't go because your father got sick and someone had to take care of your family. Her throat tightened. You investigated me? I wanted to know who I was dealing with. And what I found was someone who sacrifices herself for others, who works 2 jobs to support her family, who returned $2,000 she desperately needed because it was the right thing to do. He pushed the envelope closer. Let me help you help yourself. And the diner? She asked. What about everyone there? Daniel smiled. There's a second check in there. For the diner. Enough to renovate it, pay the staff better wages, and keep it running for the next 10 years. Because good people shouldn't have to work in failing places just to survive. Mara's hands trembled as she picked up the envelope. Inside were 2 checks, each for amounts that made her dizzy. But more than that, there was hope. Real, tangible hope for a future she'd stopped letting herself dream about. Why? She whispered. Because yesterday you taught me something I'd forgotten. That integrity isn't just about being honest when it's easy. It's about choosing the harder right over the easier wrong, even when it costs you everything. He stood up. Use it well, Mara. Build something beautiful with your life. He started to leave, then paused. And for what it's worth, I think your father would be very proud of you. Mara watched him go, tears streaming down her face, the envelope clutched in her hands. She thought about her father, about the lessons he'd taught her, about the person she'd become because of them. She thought about how close she'd come to keeping that money, how easy it would have been to justify it. And she thought about how glad she was that she hadn't. Because integrity didn't just pay. Transformed. It opened doors she didn't know existed. It created possibilities from impossible situations. But most importantly, it let her sleep at night knowing she was still the person her father raised her to be. And that, she realized, was worth more than any amount of money could ever be. Before you go, make sure you hit that like button if the story moved you, and subscribe for more incredible true stories that will restore your faith in humanity. Your support means everything to us. Now, let me know in the comments. What would you have done in Mara's situation?